When my son brought her home, all smiles and city shine, I never thought she'd be the one to tear our family apart. My name is Nancy Williams, and for 40 years I've lived on this same patch of Tennessee soil. I've weathered storms, droughts, and heartbreaks, but nothing prepared me for the day my Erin brought home Courtney. She arrived like a whirlwind from Boston, designer clothes, manicured nails, and a smile that seemed just a touch too perfect. "She's the one, Mom," Erin whispered, his eyes filled with a love I hadn't seen before, and oh, how I wanted to believe it. I opened my home and heart to her, taught her my family recipes, showed her how to tend to my vegetable garden, even gave her my mother's silver bracelet as a welcome gift. "Your family now," I told her, and I meant every word. At first, Courtney was all sweetness and light. "I've always wanted a mother figure," she'd say, her voice dripping with what I now recognize as calculated charm. She'd compliment my home-cooked meals while barely touching her plate. She'd ask about family traditions while subtly rolling her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. It was during the first family dinner when I noticed it, that flash of contempt when Erin mentioned we'd have Christmas at the farmhouse, as we'd done for generations. "But wouldn't a restaurant be more convenient?" she suggested, with a sideways glance at my dining room that suddenly seemed shabby through her eyes. That night, I overheard them arguing. "Your mother is just so quaint," she said, her voice laced with something that made my heart sink. "We can't spend every holiday trapped in that old house." Erin defended me, but his voice lacked conviction. The seed of doubt had been planted. When I offered her my mother's handmade quilt for their new apartment, she accepted it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How rustic," she said, folding it away where I suspect it would never see the light of day again. The pain of that small rejection was just the beginning. I'd spent months stitching love into every square of that quilt, just as my mother had done for me. The quilt told our family's story, each patch representing a milestone. The blue calico from my wedding dress, the faded denim from Erin's first pair of overalls, the checkered cotton from the curtains that had hung in my husband's childhood bedroom. Each piece selected and preserved with intention, with memory, with love. Courtney's dismissal wasn't just of a blanket. It was a rejection of our history, our traditions, everything that made us who we are. But I swallowed my hurt, smiled through the pain. After all, she was from a different world, sleek apartments and designer furniture, not handmade treasures carrying generations of stories. That evening, after they'd left, I walked alone through the orchard my husband's father had planted. The apple trees stood solid against the setting sun, their roots deep in the same soil that had nurtured my family for generations. I wondered if Courtney would ever understand the richness of a life built on legacy rather than luxury. If she could ever truly appreciate the man my son had become because of not despite his rural upbringing. But that was just the first sign that something wasn't right in my son's perfect new world. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to see how this unfolds. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. I've spent my entire life on this farm, raised my son here after my husband passed when Erin was only 10. I taught him everything: how to mend fences, how to know when the corn is ready for harvest, how to be the kind of man his father would be proud of. We were a team, Erin and me facing the world together. Then Courtney came along, and suddenly I was on the outside looking in. The nights became the hardest. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing my only child. Not to love, I would have celebrated that, but to someone who seemed determined to erase me from his life. The farmhouse that had always been filled with laughter now felt hollow, each room echoing with memories of times when Erin would sit at the kitchen table and tell me about his day. "He'll be back for Sunday dinner," I'd tell myself. But soon the excuses started. "Courtney's not feeling well," he'd say. "We have plans with her friends," he'd explain. "Maybe next week, Mom," became a refrain I grew to dread. I started leaving voicemails that went unreturned, sending texts that received one-word responses hours later. The distance between us grew, measured not in miles but in the growing silence. One afternoon, I baked his favorite apple pie, the one my grandmother taught me to make, and drove it to their apartment unannounced. I just wanted to see my son's face, to remind him that he still had a mother who loved him. Courtney answered the door in workout clothes, clearly surprised. "Oh, Nancy, Erin's not home," but I heard his voice in the background. I heard him ask who was at the door. "Just a delivery," she called back, blocking my view into their home. "I'll take the pie. Thanks for thinking of us." The door closed before I could speak. I stood there, pie tin transferred to her hands, feeling like a stranger, not a mother, not family, just a delivery person dropping off an unwanted package. That night, I cried for the first time since my husband's funeral. Not delicate tears, but body-shaking sobs that left me hollow. The kind that come from the deepest part of you, where fear lives. Fear that I was being erased from my own son's story. I started finding reasons to call. The tractor broke down, the roof was leaking. I hated becoming that person, the needy mother, the burden, but desperation will turn you into someone you don't recognize. The worst part was the shame that accompanied my loneliness. The knowledge that I had raised my son to spread his wings, to build his own life, and yet here I was, clinging to scraps of his attention like a drowning woman clutching at driftwood. I'd never wanted to be this mother, the one who couldn't let go, the one who inserted herself where she wasn't wanted. On Sundays, when the farmhouse felt particularly empty, I'd walk through Aaron's childhood bedroom, running my fingers over the model airplanes still suspended from the ceiling, the bookshelf still lined with his favorite adventure stories. Sometimes I'd sit on his bed, close my eyes, and almost hear the echo of his teenage laughter, the sound of his footsteps racing down the hallway. Sarah, my closest friend, noticed my fading spirit. "You're disappearing, Nancy," she told me over coffee one morning. "Don't let that city girl take your joy along with your son." But how could I explain that it wasn't just joy that was being taken, it was purpose. For 20 years, being Aaron's mother had defined me. Now that role was being systematically dismantled, rewritten by someone who seemed to view me as competition rather than family. But I still had no idea that my kindness would be used against me. If you know this pain, if you felt this loneliness, subscribe now, and like this video. Your support helps these stories reach others who need to know they're not alone. The first true betrayal came on Aaron's birthday. For 30 years, I'd made him the same breakfast, blueberry pancakes with maple syrup from our own trees. It was our tradition, something sacred between mother and son. I called him the night before. "I'll come by early," I said. "I'll bring everything." "Actually, Mom," he hesitated. "Courtney's planned a special breakfast. Maybe you could come for dinner instead." I agreed, swallowing my disappointment. That evening, I arrived with his gift, a watch that had belonged to his father, restored and polished to perfection. I'd been saving it for this birthday, this milestone. Their apartment door was unlocked, so I walked in, calling out a greeting, and then I heard them in the kitchen. "Your mother is coming for dinner." Courtney's voice was sharp, irritated. I couldn't say no. Aaron sounded defensive. "It's my birthday. It's our first chance to entertain my boss." "Aaron, I told you how important this is for my promotion. Now she'll be there with her folksy stories and country manners. My boss will think I'm marrying into the Beverly Hillbillies." I froze, gift in hand. As my son's response came, "What do you want me to do? She's my mother. Just keep her in check. Don't let her dominate the conversation with her farming tales. And for God's sake, don't let her bring up that homemade wine she's so proud of." The silence that followed cut deeper than her words. My son, my Aaron, didn't defend me, didn't remind her that this folksy woman had raised him alone, had worked the land with bleeding hands to put him through college. I should have left then, should have taken my dignity and my father's watch and walked away. But I couldn't bear the thought of missing his birthday. So I retreated, closed the door silently, and rang the doorbell, as if I had just arrived. Dinner was a performance. Courtney, all smiles for her boss, introducing me as Aaron's mother from the countryside, with a tone that made it sound like I lived in another century. I watched her subtly steer conversations away from me, saw her wince when I complimented her cooking by saying it was almost as good as homemade. When I presented Aaron with the watch, his eyes misted over. For a moment my son returned to me. "Dad's watch," he whispered. "You fixed it." Courtney cut in. "That old thing. I've been looking at tag heuers for him." She laughed, turning to her boss. "We have different tastes, clearly." The watch had been more than just a timepiece. Aaron's father had worn it every day of their marriage, through farm crises and celebrations, through the birth of our son and 1,000 ordinary moments in between. When he died, the watch stopped at the exact moment his heart did. I'd kept it in my jewelry box for 20 years, unable to bear the sight of it frozen in time. 3 months ago, I'd finally gathered the courage to take it to Mr. Landon, the only watchmaker in the county who still worked on mechanical timepieces. "Can you restore it?" I'd asked, barely able to speak past the lump in my throat. For Aaron's 30th, his father would have wanted him to have it working again. Mr. Landon, who'd known my husband, understood the significance. I'll make it like new, Nancy, he promised. And he had cleaning each tiny gear, replacing the cracked crystal, polishing the worn case until it gleamed. He refused payment, saying only, "Some things are more important than money." As Courtney dismissed this treasured heirloom, I saw the confusion in Aaron's eyes, caught between his past and this new future she was crafting for him. He slipped the watch onto his wrist with reverence, but I noticed how he angled it under his sleeve when she glanced his way, as if already ashamed of its humble origins. That night, I left early, claiming fatigue. The truth was, I couldn't bear to watch my son slip further away, couldn't stand to see him caught between his past and the future Courtney was designing for him, a future that had no place for a simple farm woman like me. And that's when I realized she wasn't who she pretended to be. If this story strikes a chord in your heart, please hit like and subscribe now. The journey only gets more intense from here. The weeks after Aaron's birthday stretched into months of growing silence. My calls went to voicemail more often. My invitations were met with excuses. The distance between my son and me became a physical ache, like phantom pain in a limb that's been severed. Our family farm had never felt so empty. The rooms that once echoed with Aaron's laughter now amplified my solitude. I'd catch myself setting two places at the dinner table out of habit, only to remove the second plate with hands that seemed to have aged overnight. I tried to fill the void, joined the church committee, volunteered at the local food bank. Anything to keep the loneliness at bay. But nothing could replace the Sunday dinners, the easy conversations, the comfortable silence of family simply being together. When Aaron and Courtney did visit, it was always rushed, always on their way to somewhere more important. Courtney would glance at her watch repeatedly, making small comments about the long drive back to the city, the early meeting she had the next day. "We really should get going," became her mantra, often before we'd even finished our coffee, and Aaron would follow her lead, apologetic but compliant. I watched my strong-willed boy, who once stood his ground against school bullies and harsh farm conditions, bend to her every whim. It was like watching a tall oak slowly bow under relentless wind. One Sunday, they arrived unannounced. My heart soared at the surprise visit, until I saw their expressions. "We have news," Aaron said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "We're moving," Courtney announced, triumphant. Aaron's been offered a position in his firm's Chicago office. Chicago, 800 miles away. My world collapsed into a single point of pain. "It's a big opportunity," Aaron added quickly. "The salary is double what I make now." I looked at my son, searching for some sign that this hurt him too, this additional distance, this further severing of roots. But he avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the kitchen wall behind me. "When do you leave?" I managed to ask. 3 weeks, Courtney answered. "We've already found an apartment, corporate housing until we buy something permanent." 3 weeks, not enough time to process, to prepare, to memorize every line of my son's face. "I'm happy for you," I lied, because that's what mothers do. We smile through our breaking hearts. They stayed less than an hour. As they walked to their car, I noticed Aaron hesitate, looking back at the farmhouse, as if seeing it for the first time, or the last. But Courtney tugged his arm, and he turned away. That night, I sat on the porch swing where I used to rock Aaron to sleep on summer evenings. The same swing where I'd taught him to read, where we'd shelled peas and shared secrets, where I'd promised him after his father died that we would always have each other. The crickets sang their nightly chorus as darkness settled over the fields like a familiar quilt. How many nights had I sat here, planning for Aaron's future, calculating how to stretch the farm's modest income to cover college tuition, rehearsing encouraging speeches for his first heartbreak, dreaming of the day he'd bring home someone who would love both him and this land that had shaped him. Never had I imagined that future would take him so far away, not just in miles, but in spirit. The week before they left, I made myself busy with practical things. I packed boxes of homemade preserves. "You'll have a taste of home." I wrote down family recipes on index cards. "You'll have a taste of home, in case you want to make your grandmother's cornbread." I framed a photo of Aaron as a boy, standing proudly beside the first tractor he'd learned to drive. "You'll have a Texans remember where you came from." Courtney accepted these offerings with thinly veiled indifference. I overheard her tell Aaron they'd find a place for all this country stuff in a tone that suggested that place might be the back of a closet, or worse, a garbage bin, once they were safely away. On their final visit, Aaron hugged me tightly at the door. "I'll call every week," he promised. Over his shoulder, I saw Courtney roll her eyes, already planning to ensure those calls would become increasingly rare, and what I feared most began to happen. If you understand this heartache, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support reminds us all that no one should face such pain alone. With my son now living in Chicago, Courtney's true colors began to show without restraint. The pretense of respect she'd maintained, however thinly, vanished entirely. It started with the holidays. Thanksgiving had always been sacred in our family. Even in college, Aaron had made the journey home. But now, we're spending Thanksgiving with Courtney's family, Aaron told me over the phone. Her parents have a condo in Florida. We thought we could use a warm break before winter sets in. Christmas brought the same news, then Easter, each family tradition discarded like outdated fashion. When they did visit, Courtney made it clear it was an obligation, not a choice. She'd sigh dramatically when Aaron suggested stopping at the local diner I loved. She'd wrinkle her nose at the farm smells that had been the backdrop of his childhood. "Don't you think it's time to sell this place?" she asked during one visit, glancing around the living room with undisguised disdain. "It's so much work for you, Nancy. And really, who wants to live this far from civilization?" I looked at Aaron, waiting for him to remind her that this was his childhood home, the land his father and grandfather had worked. But he studied his coffee cup in silence. "This is my home," I said simply. "I don't find it uncivilized at all." "That's because you don't know any better," she replied with a laugh that contained no humor. "You've never lived anywhere else." The comment stung because it contained a grain of truth. I hadn't traveled widely or lived in different cities, but my choice to remain on the family farm wasn't born of ignorance. It was born of love. Love for the land, for the community, for the life my husband and I had built. Aaron shifted uncomfortably. "Courtney just means it's a lot for you to manage alone, Mom." "I'm managing fine," I said, though the arthritis in my hands made farm work increasingly difficult. "This land has been in our family for generations. And that matters." "Why?" Courtney challenged. "It's just dirt and old buildings. You could sell it to a developer and live comfortably in a nice retirement community." "Because it's our heritage," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "It's your husband's birthright." Courtney rolled her eyes. "Heritage doesn't pay the bills, or keep you company at night." The cruelty of her words hung in the air. Aaron looked between us, torn between the woman he'd chosen and the woman who'd given him life. "Let's change the subject," he suggested weakly. But the damage was done. Courtney had thrown down a gauntlet, challenging not just my home, but my entire existence. And worse, my son had not defended either. That night after they left, I found muddy footprints tracked deliberately across my clean kitchen floor. Courtney's doing, I was certain. A small petty act of defiance. A message that my home, my standards meant nothing to her. I cleaned the floor on my hands and knees, tears mixing with the soapy water. Not because of dirty footprints, but because I was losing the battle for my son's heart, one visit at a time. What Courtney couldn't possibly understand was that this dirt and old buildings contained the soul of our family. Every fence post had a story. The giant oak by the drive was where my husband had proposed. The barn's east wall still bore height marks tracking Aaron's growth, year by year. The kitchen window overlooked the garden, where 4 generations of Williams women had grown the food that nourished their families. This wasn't just property, it was living history, our history. Pastor Jim tried to counsel patience. "She's young," he said, after church one Sunday, when I confided my growing distress. "City folks have different values. Give her time to understand what this place means." But I sensed time wouldn't change Courtney. The problem wasn't that she didn't understand the farm's value. It was that she actively resented it. Resented the pull it still had on Aaron's heart. Resented the connection it represented to a past she hadn't shared and couldn't control. During their next visit, she brought expensive wine and cheese, presenting them with the air of someone introducing culture to the uncultivated. "I thought we might elevate our usual fare," she said with a smirk, glancing dismissively at the homemade bread and stew I'd prepared. Aaron winced, but said nothing. Another small defeat in an ongoing war for his loyalty. Later that evening, I overheard them arguing on the porch. "You need to stand up for me," she hissed. "Your mother looks at me like I'm the enemy." "She's trying," Aaron defended weakly. "This is all she's ever known." "Well, it's not all you've ever known anymore. You have a life with me now. In the real world." The real world, as if my existence was somehow less valid, less authentic than her urban lifestyle. But what she did next shattered my heart into pieces. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. to follow Nancy's journey. The most shocking moments are yet to come. Thanksgiving eventually came to my farm again, but only because Courtney's parents decided to vacation in Europe instead. It wasn't the homecoming I'd prayed for, but I was grateful for any chance to have my son at my table. I spent days preparing, polished the silver that had been my grandmother's, brought out the good china, baked pies, apple, pumpkin, and pecan, Aaron's favorite, cleaned until every surface gleamed. My hands ached from the effort, but my heart was light with anticipation. They arrived with two unexpected guests. Courtney's college friends, a couple who greeted me with the practiced politeness of people meeting someone they've heard unflattering things about. I hadn't been told to expect additional guests, but I smiled and welcomed them. There's always room at a farmhouse table. Dinner started well enough. The turkey was perfect, the sides abundant. I'd outdone myself, driven by a desperate need to make this meal memorable, to remind Aaron of the home that would always welcome him. "Mom," Aaron said after his first bite of stuffing, "this is exactly how I remember it. Nobody makes Thanksgiving like you." For a moment warmth spread through me. Then Courtney laughed. "Oh please," she said, setting down her barely touched plate. "It's just boxed stuffing with some celery thrown in. My mother has her chef prepare a cornbread stuffing with artisanal sausage that would put this to shame." The table fell silent. Aaron's face flushed. "Actually," I said quietly, "this is a recipe passed down from my great-grandmother. Everything is made from scratch." Courtney shrugged. "Well, not everyone can afford a professional chef, I suppose. But really, in this day and age, who has time for from scratch? It's almost primitive." Her friends exchanged glances, visibly uncomfortable. "Speaking of primitive," Courtney continued, picking up her wine glass, "Aaron tells me you actually still preserve your own vegetables, like in the 1800s. Mom's preserves win ribbons at the county fair." Aaron interjected, a flicker of his old loyalty showing through. "How quaint," Courtney said, emphasizing the word like it was a slur. "Do they give ribbons for using indoor plumbing too?" Her friends laughed nervously, caught between loyalty to Courtney and discomfort at witnessing such disrespect. I felt heat rise to my face but maintained my composure. Would anyone like more turkey? The moment passed, but Courtney wasn't finished. Throughout dinner, she made small cutting remarks about the farmhouse's rustic condition, about my simple way of dressing, about how surprising it was that someone like Aaron had come from such a background. Each comment was a paper cut, small on its own, but agonizing in accumulation. The final blow came with dessert. I placed my pies on the table with pride, especially the pecan made with nuts from the trees Aaron's father had planted. "If you want to eat," Courtney suddenly announced loudly, gesturing at my homemade pies, "you might as well eat off the floor." She laughed as if she'd made a clever joke, but her eyes were cold. "I mean, everything else here is so down to earth." The table fell silent. Her friends looked mortified. Aaron stared at his plate, and something in me, something that had bent and bent under Courtney's cruelty, finally broke. I stood, tears stinging my eyes but refusing to fall. "I think it's time for you all to leave." "Mom," Aaron began, but I raised my hand. "Not you, son, her and her friends. My home has always welcomed everyone, but I will not be mocked at my own table." I remember every detail of that terrible moment. The grandfather clock ticking in the corner, marking seconds that felt like hours. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg from the pies, mixing with the tension in the air. The way the candlelight caught the tears forming in Aaron's eyes. Courtney's friends were already gathering their belongings, mumbling awkward apologies. But Courtney herself remained seated, a smug smile playing at her lips. "Aaron, your mother is overreacting," she said calmly. "It was just a joke. Honestly, country people have no sense of humor." I looked at my son, silently pleading for him to finally stand up for me, for the home that had sheltered him, for the values I'd tried to instill. For one terrible moment, he hesitated, trapped between worlds. Then he slowly rose to his feet. "Courtney," he said, his voice strained but firm, "that was out of line. You owe my mother an apology." She stared at him, incredulous. "You can't be serious. It was just an insult," he finished for her. "A deliberate one. And not the first." Something shifted in Courtney's expression, shock giving way to calculation. She stood, smoothing her designer dress. "Fine. I apologize if my humor was misunderstood. We should go. Our hotel is waiting." She marched to the door without another word, her friends trailing awkwardly behind. Aaron lingered, torn. "Go," I told him gently. We'll talk tomorrow. After they left, I sat alone at the table, surrounded by the remnants of the meal I'd poured my heart into. The pies cooled untouched. The candles burned lower. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, dusting the fields with white. That night, I promised myself I would never be the same again. If you believe no one deserves such treatment in their own home, like this video and subscribe for the next chapter. Your support gives voice to those who've been silenced. The aftermath of that Thanksgiving was devastating. Aaron called repeatedly, but Courtney had convinced him that I had overreacted, that her comments were just jokes. I was too sensitive to understand. "Mom, you embarrassed her in front of her friends," he said during one call, his voice strained. "She was just trying to lighten the mood." By suggesting I eat off the floor, I asked, still raw from the humiliation, "You're taking it too literally." "It's just city humor, Mom. Different from what you're used to." The distance between us stretched beyond miles. It was as if we now spoke different languages, lived in different worlds. The boy who once knew my every expression, who could tell my moods from the set of my shoulders, now couldn't or wouldn't see when I was deeply wounded. Christmas arrived. No invitation came to visit them in Chicago. No suggestion that they might return to the farm. Just a generic card, signed by both their names, obviously selected and sent by Courtney. No personal note. No "love you, Mom." For the first time in my life, I spent Christmas Day alone. I didn't put up a tree, didn't hang the stockings, including the small red one with Aaron's name embroidered by my mother's hand. Instead, I sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching snow blanket the fields, feeling a similar coldness settle over my heart. January brought news that cut deeper than the winter wind. Courtney's pregnant, Aaron told me over the phone, joy evident in his voice. "You're going to be a grandmother." Joy and grief collided within me. A grandchild, the blessing I'd prayed for. But under Courtney's control, would I ever truly know this child? Would I be allowed to be a real grandmother, or kept at arm's length like an embarrassing family secret? "That's wonderful news," I managed to say. "I'm so happy for you both." "Thanks, Mom." Courtney's already planning the nursery. Her mother's coming to help choose colors next week. Her mother, not me. Another reminder of my place in their lives. Outside looking in. "When is she due?" I asked. "July. We're hoping for a girl, but I'd be happy with either. Have you thought of names?" A pause. "Courtney likes Madison for a girl, after her grandmother. Not Evelyn, my mother's name. Not Sarah, my grandmother's." Another branch of family history pruned away. "That's lovely," I lied. "Madison Williams has a nice ring to it." Another pause. Longer this time. "Actually, Mom, we've been talking about hyphenating. Madison Grant Williams." Courtney thinks it's important to keep her family name going too. Grant, the name of the people who had spent holidays in Florida, rather than welcome my son into their family. The name Courtney wanted equal billing with the Williams name that had been carried by 6 generations on this farm. I said nothing. What could I say? It felt like another erasure, another step away from the roots I'd tried so hard to nurture. After the call, I walked the perimeter of the farm in the falling snow, past the oak where Aaron had built his first treehouse, past the pond where he'd learned to swim, past the fields where we'd picnicked on summer evenings. A grandchild would be born who might never know these places, never climb that tree, never swim in that pond, never hear the stories of the people who had loved this land. Something precious was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to hold on to it. That night, I pulled out the chest of baby clothes I'd preserved for this very moment: tiny hand-knit sweaters, the christening gown Aaron had worn, the quilt my mother had made for him with farm animals dancing around the border. I'd imagined giving these treasures to my son and his wife, sharing stories of his infancy as we prepared for my grandchild's arrival. Now, looking at these carefully preserved memories, I knew Courtney would dismiss them as outdated, unsophisticated, more rustic items she wouldn't want contaminating her designer nursery. Sleep eluded me. I found myself in Aaron's old room, sitting on the floor by his bookshelf. I pulled out his baby album, tracing my finger over photos of his first steps, first birthday, first day of school. In each image, his father and I gazed at him with the kind of love that fills every corner of your heart, the kind that redefines your very existence. Would anyone show my photos to my grandchild? Would this little one ever know how profoundly they were already loved by a grandmother they might rarely see? The isolation became unbearable. My friends tried to include me in their family gatherings, but watching their children and grandchildren together only deepened my sense of loss. Pastor Jim suggested I join the church's mission trip, get some perspective, see how others live with far less, but I couldn't bear to be even farther from Aaron when the baby came. I began to disappear into myself. The vibrant, confident woman who had run this farm single-handedly after her husband's death was fading, replaced by a ghost who moved through routines without purpose or joy. But God has His own plans for revealing the truth. If you've ever felt your legacy slipping away, like this video and subscribe to see how Nancy's story unfolds. Sometimes, when we feel most lost, the path forward appears in unexpected ways. Spring arrived, melting the snow and my resolution to keep my distance. Whatever Courtney had done, whatever pain she'd caused, I couldn't miss this chapter of my son's life. I couldn't be absent as he prepared to become a father. I called Aaron and proposed a visit. I'd like to help with the nursery, I offered. Maybe bring some of your old baby things. The crib your father built is still in perfect condition. Silence greeted my suggestion. Then I don't know, Mom. Courtney's got pretty specific ideas about the nursery theme, and her mother's already ordered a crib from some Italian designer. I understand, I said, though I didn't. But I'd still like to visit, see your new home, be part of this time in your lives. More silence, then a muffled conversation. Aaron covering the phone to consult with Courtney, no doubt. How about next weekend? He finally suggested. Just maybe stay at a hotel? The guest room is being converted to the nursery, and we're in the middle of renovations. A hotel, not welcome under my own son's roof. But I agreed, desperate for any connection. The following Friday found me driving into Chicago, navigating unfamiliar streets to the high-rise where they now lived. The doorman eyed my modest car suspiciously before directing me to visitor parking. Aaron met me in the lobby, embracing me with genuine warmth that momentarily melted the frost between us. You look good, Mom, he said, studying my face. I'd had my hair done, bought a new dress, small efforts to bridge the gulf between my world and theirs. Their apartment was stunning, all sleek lines and modern furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Nothing like the warm lived-in comfort of the farmhouse. Nothing that said Aaron to me. Courtney emerged from the bedroom, her pregnancy now visible beneath her designer maternity wear. She offered a cool cheek for me to kiss. Nancy, she acknowledged. You found us all right? The city can be so confusing for out-of-towners. I had been driving these Midwest roads since before she was born, but I just smiled. The GPS helped. The nursery was exactly as I'd feared, a designer's vision in fashionable grays and yellows, with furniture that cost more than my entire living room set. Nothing homemade. Nothing passed down. Nothing with history. It's lovely, I said, running my hand over the imported crib that would replace the one Aaron's father had lovingly crafted. We're having a small issue with the contractors, Courtney mentioned, gesturing to an unfinished wall. They were supposed to install custom shelving, but they're running behind. I could help, I offered. I've done plenty of carpentry over the years. Your father-in-law taught me well, I added, looking at Aaron. Courtney laughed. Oh, that's sweet, Nancy, but we need it done professionally. For safety reasons, as if my hands, which had built fences that withstood decades of harsh weather, couldn't safely construct a shelf. Aaron gave me an apologetic look but said nothing to contradict his wife. Later, while Courtney took a business call, Aaron showed me around the rest of their home. In their bedroom, I noticed something familiar, a small wooden box on his dresser. You kept it, I said, touching the box his father had carved for him on his 10th birthday. Of course, Aaron replied. I keep my watch in it, Dad's watch. A small victory. A piece of home that had survived Courtney's purge of his past. As we walked back to the living room, Aaron's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and excused himself to take the call in the hallway. Left alone, I noticed Courtney's purse on the counter, partially open, and visible inside, a small ultrasound photo. My first glimpse of my grandchild. Without thinking, I reached for it, just to look closer. As I lifted the image, something else fell from her purse, a receipt. And a name caught my eye. Not a store or restaurant, but a name. Michael Grant, Courtney's brother whom I'd heard mentioned but never met. And below his name, a staggering sum of money transferred just days ago. money flowing out of my son's accounts to Courtney's family. I quickly replaced everything as I heard Courtney returning. But the image of that receipt burned in my mind. Why was my son, a man with a baby on the way, transferring such large sums to his brother-in-law? The rest of my visit passed in a blur, my mind racing with questions. I noticed other troubling signs I might have missed before. How Courtney controlled all conversation about finances, how Aaron seemed stressed when discussing their future plans, the way he deflected questions about his career trajectory in Chicago. That evening, Aaron insisted on taking us to an expensive restaurant for dinner. It's Courtney's favorite, he explained, though I noticed she barely ate, pushing expensive food around her plate while checking her phone constantly. The bill came and Aaron's credit card was declined. The flash of panic in his eyes was unmistakable. Courtney looked annoyed rather than concerned, handing over her own card with a dismissive, "The accounts must be mixed up again. I'll handle it." Later, while Aaron excused himself to the restroom, she leaned across the table. "Don't mention the card thing to Aaron," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "He's so sensitive about providing for us, especially with the baby coming. Men and their pride, you know." But it wasn't pride I'd seen in my son's eyes, it was fear. The fear of a man watching his financial security crumble without understanding why. In my hotel room that night, I couldn't sleep. The receipt, the declined card, Aaron's stress, they formed a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. What exactly was happening to my son's finances? And why was Courtney's family benefiting while Aaron seemed increasingly anxious? I'd always trusted Aaron to manage his own life. Even when I disagreed with his choices, I'd respected his independence. But what if this wasn't about choices? What if something more sinister was happening? Something he couldn't see because love had blinded him. That day I realized her mask was beginning to slip. If you sense there's more to this story than meets the eye, hit like and subscribe now. The truth always finds its way to the surface, especially when protected by a mother's love. After discovering the mysterious money transfer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in my son's marriage. Call it mother's intuition or simple common sense, but the pieces didn't fit. I returned home from Chicago with more questions than answers, and with a determination to understand what was happening to my son. My Aaron, who had always been honest, hardworking, and careful with money. The opportunity came in the most unexpected way. While shopping in the nearby town, I quite literally bumped carts with a woman I didn't recognize. "I'm so sorry," I apologized, helping her retrieve a box of cereal that had fallen. She looked at me curiously. "You're Aaron Williams' mother, aren't you, Nancy? I recognize you from his photos." My heart quickened. "Yes, I am. Do you know my son? I'm Jessica Turner. I worked with Aaron at his firm before he transferred to Chicago." She smiled warmly. "He always spoke so highly of you." We ended up having coffee together, this stranger who somehow felt like a lifeline to my son's world. Jessica had been Aaron's colleague and friend for several years, and spoke of him with genuine affection. "I was surprised when he took the Chicago position," she confided, "especially since he'd just been promoted here. But Courtney was insistent, from what I gathered. He said it was for a better opportunity." I said. "Double the salary." Jessica frowned. "Double? That can't be right. The Chicago office doesn't pay any more than ours. It's actually a less desirable placement, because of the cost of living." My coffee cup froze midway to my lips. "But that's what he told me. Why else would he uproot his life?" Jessica hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I shouldn't gossip. Please," I said, reaching for her hand. "If you know something about my son, I need to hear it." She sighed. "There were rumors about Courtney, that she was involved with someone in Chicago, a client of the firm actually. Very wealthy, very married. Nothing was proven, but the timing of their move raised eyebrows. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Are you saying she was unfaithful?" "I don't know for certain," Jessica said quickly. "But I do know Aaron started acting differently after they got engaged. More secretive, less social. And there were unexplained expenses he couldn't quite afford on his salary. Several of us noticed he was dipping into his savings, taking on extra projects for bonuses. The receipt in Courtney's purse, the large transfer to her brother. It started to make a terrible kind of sense. And then," Jessica continued, lowering her voice, "right before they left, I overheard Courtney on the phone in the ladies' room. She was arguing with someone about money. She said, and I quote, 'He doesn't suspect anything. Just make sure Michael gets the transfer by Friday. Michael, the same name on the receipt. My hands began to tremble. Aaron deserves better, Jessica said softly. He's one of the good ones, always ethical, always kind. The way he talked about you and the farm, it was clear where he got those values. We parted with an exchange of phone numbers. Jessica promised to send me any other information she remembered or discovered. That night, unable to sleep, I did something I'd never done before. I searched for Courtney online. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, platforms I barely understood, but managed to navigate through sheer determination. What I found confirmed Jessica's suspicions. Photos from 2 years ago, before Aaron, showing Courtney with an older man at Chicago charity events. His arm around her waist, her looking up at him adoringly. A man who, according to the captions, was a senior partner at an investment firm. A married man, and more recently, photos of her in Chicago, supposedly at girls' nights during times when Aaron was traveling for work. The same man lurking in the background, not tagged, but unmistakably present. But most damning of all, a public argument on her brother Michael's page about a business they were apparently launching together. A high-end boutique in Chicago's Gold Coast, opening soon according to the Post. Funded how? With my son's hard-earned money. The pieces were falling into place. Courtney hadn't wanted Aaron for love. She'd wanted access to his steady income, his perfect credit, his trusting nature. A backup plan while she pursued her married lover. A facade of respectability while she and her brother siphoned away his savings for their business venture. And now, a baby. My grandchild. An innocent pawn in her schemes. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I printed everything I'd found. The photos, the social media posts, screenshots of Michael's business announcements. I organized them chronologically, cross-referencing with what I knew of Aaron and Courtney's relationship timeline. The pattern was unmistakable. Each major financial decision in their relationship, the engagement, the wedding, the move to Chicago, the expensive apartment, coincided with a new phase in the boutique's development, or with activities involving the mysterious Richard Kensington, the married investment banker whose arm seemed perpetually around Courtney's waist in photos where Aaron was conspicuously absent. By morning, my dining room table was covered with evidence. I sat staring at it, a cup of cold coffee forgotten beside me. This wasn't just about protecting my relationship with my son anymore. This was about saving him from financial ruin and profound betrayal. Pastor Jim stopped by, concerned when I'd missed Sunday service, something I hadn't done in 20 years. He found me surrounded by my makeshift investigation. "Nancy," he said gently, after I'd explained everything, "you need to be absolutely certain before you take this to Aaron. This will destroy his marriage." "His marriage is already destroyed," I replied. "He just doesn't know it yet." "Then pray for guidance," he advised, "and for the strength to help him through what comes next." I did pray for clarity, for courage, for the right words to break my son's heart, in order to save his future, and for my unborn grandchild, an innocent caught in a web of deceit, not of their making. Jessica called the next day. "There's more," she said without preamble. "I talked to HR under the guise of updating address information. Aaron's salary in Chicago is actually less than what he made here. Whatever he told you about double the money was either a lie he was told, or a lie he's telling." Another piece of the puzzle, another confirmation of my worst fears. And then everything started to make sense. If you're invested in seeing justice for Nancy and Aaron, like this video and subscribe to the channel. The truth is emerging, and the day of reckoning approaches. Armed with what I'd learned, I faced an impossible decision. Tell my son his pregnant wife was using him, possibly cheating on him, or stay silent watching him drain his life savings for a woman who saw him as nothing but a convenient ATM. I prayed for guidance, consulted my oldest friend, Pastor Jim, who'd known Aaron since he was a boy, spoke with Jessica again, who provided more details about Courtney's suspicious behavior at the firm, and I waited for the right moment. It came sooner than expected. Aaron called on a Tuesday evening, his voice tight with stress. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but is there any way you could lend me some money? Just temporarily. We're having some cash flow issues with the baby coming, and our savings are, well, they're not where they should be." "Of course," I said immediately. "Whatever you need." "But Aaron, can I ask what happened to your savings? You've always been so careful with money." A heavy sigh. "It's complicated. Courtney's brother had this business opportunity. A boutique that's supposed to open next month. I invested pretty heavily. I see, I said carefully. And how is Courtney feeling about the baby? Everything going well? She's been traveling a lot, actually. Her mother needed help in Florida, and then her friend had a crisis in New York. He trailed off, and I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. She's due in 6 weeks, but she's still so active. The doctor says it's fine, but, son, I said gently, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen with an open heart. Can you do that? Silence. Then you've never led me wrong before. I'm listening. I told him everything. About Jessica's revelations, about the photos I'd found online, about the receipt in Courtney's purse, and the argument her brother had documented on social media about their business, the business my son was unknowingly funding. Aaron was quiet for so long I thought we'd lost connection. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I knew something wasn't right. Expenses that didn't make sense. Phone calls she'd taken another room. Weekends away that seemed convenient. But I wanted to believe her. I wanted our family to work. I know, son, and I'm so sorry. What do I do now, Mom? There's a baby coming. My baby. First, I said firmly, you protect yourself and your child. You talk to a lawyer. You secure what assets you have left, and you come home if you need to. The farm is still yours as much as mine. It always has been. 2 days later, Aaron called again. His voice was different, stronger, more resolved. I confronted her, he said. With everything you told me, plus some bank statements I found hidden in her desk. She denied it at first, then tried to twist it around, make it my fault for being financially controlling. But when I mentioned the man from the photos, she changed. How so? Cold, calculating, like a mask slipping off. She admitted the boutique was her, and Michael's plan all along. Said I should be grateful to be involved in a growing business. When I asked about the other man, she just laughed and said I was convenient while she sorted out her real relationship. My heart broke for him. Oh, Aaron, it gets worse, Mom. I asked about the baby, if it was even mine. My breath caught. I hadn't even considered that possibility. She says it is, but she also said she'd make sure I never saw the child if I didn't keep funding her boutique, that she'd take me for everything in the divorce. Rage filled me, pure righteous anger, unlike anything I'd felt before. Not for myself, but for my son, for my grandchild. She's at her brother's tonight, Aaron continued, probably plotting their next move. But I've already called a lawyer, and a coming home, Mom, just for a while, to figure things out, if that's okay. This farm has always been your home. I told him, tears flowing freely now. It always will be. The next day, I drove to the city to help Aaron pack his essential belongings. Courtney had cleared out their joint accounts that morning, but Aaron's lawyer had already filed emergency orders to freeze any further assets. As we were loading the last box into my truck, Courtney arrived with her brother, the mysterious Michael from the receipt. Her face contorted with fury when she saw us. What do you think you're doing? She demanded. Leaving, Aaron said simply. It's over, Courtney. You can't leave, she spat. What about the baby? What about our life? The boutique opens in 3 weeks. The boutique you funded with my retirement savings, Aaron asked quietly. While you were seeing Richard on the side, her face went white at the mention of her lover's name. You have no proof of anything, Michael interjected, stepping forward aggressively. Actually, came a voice from behind us. He has plenty. Jessica stood there, phone in hand. I've been recording Courtney's business calls at the office for months, standard practice for legal compliance, including several with you, Michael, discussing how to extract maximum capital from the Aaron situations before, and I quote, cutting him loose after the baby provides long-term child support. Courtney lunged for the phone, but Aaron stepped between them. It's over, he repeated. My lawyer will contact you about arrangements for the baby, my baby. The paternity test is already scheduled. As we drove away, leaving Courtney screaming threats on the sidewalk, Aaron was quiet for a long time. Finally, he reached over and squeezed my hand. I should have listened to you from the beginning, he said. You saw what I couldn't. I didn't tell him about the sleepless nights I'd spent piecing it all together, the hours researching how to navigate social media platforms I barely understood, the conversations with Jessica where we built our case piece by painful piece. I didn't mention how I'd agonized over whether to tell him at all, knowing the truth would shatter his world. Instead, I simply squeezed his hand back. Love makes us blind sometimes, but it also gives us strength to rebuild. The 4-hour drive home was mostly silent. Aaron stared out the window, as familiar countryside replaced city skyline, rolling hills, scattered farmhouses, open sky stretching endlessly above. About halfway home, he started to cry. Quiet, dignified tears that he tried to hide by turning his face to the window. "It's okay, son," I said softly. "You're allowed to grieve what you thought you had." "I feel so stupid, Mom," he whispered. All the signs were there. The unexplained expenses, the secrets, the way she never really wanted to build a life with me, just use what I could provide. "You weren't stupid. You were loving. You were trusting. Those aren't flaws. They're the best parts of you." When we turned onto the long gravel drive leading to our farmhouse, Aaron sat up straighter. The familiar landscape, the old oak tree, the red barn, the fields stretching to the horizon, seemed to ground him, restore him. "I never should have left," he said simply. That night, after settling him into his childhood room, I sat alone on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge. The same stars that had witnessed generations of Williams' family joys and sorrows. The same stars that would now watch over us, as we helped my son heal, and prepared to welcome his child, under very different circumstances than we'd imagined. But what she did after this, no one could have predicted. If you want to see how Courtney faces the consequences of her actions, like and subscribe now. Justice is sweet, but sometimes revenge is sweeter. The weeks following Aaron's departure from Chicago were a whirlwind of legal meetings, financial forensics, and emotional healing. He moved back into his old room at the farmhouse, the space unchanged since his high school days. Some nights, I'd hear him pacing, unable to sleep. Other times, I'd find him sitting on the porch swing at dawn, watching the sun rise over the fields his father and grandfather had tended. Slowly, the full extent of Courtney's deception emerged. Aaron's lawyer discovered she had diverted nearly $200,000 of his savings to her brother's business accounts. His retirement fund was depleted, his credit cards maxed out with charges for luxury items that were nowhere to be found in their apartment. And the other man, Richard Kensington, a wealthy investment banker, had been in Courtney's life all along. Emails recovered from her cloud storage revealed their relationship had never ended, even after her engagement to Aaron. They had planned for her to divorce Aaron once the baby was born and child support secured, allowing her to pursue her real life with Richard while maintaining financial stability. "How could I have been so blind?" Aaron asked one evening, as we shelled peas on the porch, falling back into old routines that seemed to comfort him. "Love makes us see what we want to see," I told him. "There's no shame in having an open heart." "But you saw through her," he pointed out. "Mothers have different eyes," I said simply. "We look for different things." The paternity test confirmed that the baby was indeed Aaron's. Despite everything, this news brought him immeasurable relief. Whatever happened with Courtney, the child was innocent, and Aaron was determined to be a present father. Courtney, meanwhile, was unraveling. The boutique opening was delayed as investors pulled out, learning of the financial improprieties. Richard Kensington, whose wife had finally discovered the affair, publicly denied any meaningful relationship with Courtney, calling her a brief mistake. Her carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing. She made a last, desperate attempt to salvage her plans. On a rainy Sunday morning, she arrived at the farm unannounced, 8 months pregnant, and tearful. "Aaron," she pleaded, when he answered the door, "I've made terrible mistakes. I know that now, but I love you. I always have. Those other things, they were just confusion, fear about becoming a mother." I watched from the kitchen as my son studied the woman who had nearly destroyed him. His face was calm, betraying no emotion. "And the money?" he asked quietly. "My retirement savings, the maxed out credit cards. Michael took advantage of me," she claimed, tears flowing convincingly. "He manipulated me, said it was just temporary. We'll pay it all back, I promise." Aaron glanced toward the kitchen, catching my eye. I gave him a small nod, trusting his judgment. "Come in out of the rain," he finally said. "We should talk." For 2 hours they sat at the dining room table, the same table where she had once suggested I should eat off the floor. I stayed nearby, pretending to busy myself with baking, unwilling to leave my son alone with her manipulations. I couldn't hear everything they discussed, but I caught phrases. Her begging for another chance, him calmly setting boundaries, her promising to change, him remaining steadfast. Finally Aaron stood. "I'll be co-parenting with you, Courtney. I'll be at every doctor's appointment, every school event. I will love our child unconditionally. But we will never be a couple again. That trust is broken beyond repair. Because of her." Courtney suddenly shrieked, pointing toward me in the kitchen. "She turned you against me. She never wanted us to work." "No," Aaron said firmly. This is because of you. Your choices. Your lies. Mom only helped me see what was right in front of my eyes. Courtney's face transformed, the mask of contrition vanishing completely. You'll regret this, she hissed. Both of you. As she stormed toward the door, she paused in the kitchen, facing me directly for the first time. You think you've won, she said, voice low and venomous. But he'll resent you eventually, for costing him his marriage, his child's intact home. I met her gaze steadily. My son knows the truth. That's all that matters to me. Truth, she scoffed. You're just a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see her precious boy love someone else. No, I replied calmly. I'm a mother who couldn't stand to see her son exploited by someone who never loved him at all. Something flashed in her eyes then, perhaps a momentary recognition of her own depravity, quickly buried under renewed anger. Without another word, she left, the screen door slamming behind her. Aaron came to stand beside me, his arm around my shoulders. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. 2 weeks later, Courtney went into early labor. Despite everything, Aaron was there, supporting her through the birth of their daughter. My granddaughter, Evelyn Rose Williams, named for my mother and Aaron's grandmother. In that hospital room, watching my son hold his daughter for the first time, I saw healing begin, not for the relationship with Courtney. That was irreparable, but for Aaron's wounded heart. Love has that power, especially the pure love between parent and child. As for Courtney, her empire of lies continued to crumble. The boutique never opened. Her brother faced charges for financial fraud. Richard Kensington publicly denied her claims that he had promised to leave his wife. Her carefully crafted life of luxury and deception disintegrated, leaving her with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. What happened next revealed the true depths of Courtney's vindictiveness. Unable to accept her plans had failed, she launched a smear campaign against Aaron on social media, painting herself as the victim of a controlling husband who'd forced her to move to his backward hometown during her pregnancy. She posted carefully edited audio clips from their arguments, photos of the farmhouse captioned with mocking comments about primitive living conditions. Her followers, mostly city friends who'd never met Aaron, were quick to condemn him, sending hateful messages and even threats. Aaron, ever honorable, refused to engage in public mudslinging, especially with his newborn daughter's well-being at stake. Let her tell whatever stories she needs to, he said, when I suggested he defend himself. People who matter know the truth. The most painful moment came when Courtney attempted to use Evelyn as leverage in the custody hearings, claiming the farm was an unsafe environment for an infant. She brought photos of the barn, the tractor shed, the chicken coop, presenting normal farm fixtures as deadly hazards. The judge fortunately saw through her tactics. Mrs. Grant Williams, he said during one hearing, I grew up on a farm not unlike Mr. Williams. I learned more about responsibility, safety, and the value of hard work there than most children learn in any urban setting. Courtney's face had flushed with anger at being thwarted. As she left the courtroom, she hissed at Aaron, "This isn't over." But it was. The legal system presented with evidence of her financial misconduct, her instability, and Aaron's steady character granted him significant custody rights. While Courtney maintained partial custody, her influence would be limited by court-mandated boundaries. The final blow to Courtney's ego came when Richard Kensington's wife, Elaine, reached out to Aaron directly. I wanted to thank you, she said, during their brief meeting at a neutral coffee shop, for having the courage to expose what was happening. Richard and I are in counseling now. We might not make it, but at least we're facing the truth. Yet even after everything, I chose forgiveness. If you believe in the power of truth and forgiveness, like this video and subscribe to the channel. The final chapter of Nancy's story will touch your heart in unexpected ways. 2 years have passed since those turbulent days. The farm that has been in our family for generations now echoes with new laughter, my granddaughter Evelyn's delighted squeals as she chases butterflies across the same fields her father once played in. Aaron has rebuilt his life with remarkable resilience. He works remotely now, allowing him to split his time between the farm and a small apartment in town, where Evelyn stays during his custody weeks. Courtney eventually moved back to Boston after all her Chicago dreams collapsed, taking their daughter with her half the time, a painful arrangement, but one that Aaron has accepted with grace for Evelyn's sake. I've watched my son transform through this journey, deeper, stronger, wiser. The scars of Courtney's betrayal will always be part of him, but they no longer define him. And our relationship, tested and strained by her machinations, has emerged more honest and profound than before. As for me, many ask if I hate Courtney for what she did to my son, for the pain she caused, for the years of retirement security she stole. The truth is more complex. Hate consumes the person who harbors it more than its intended target. I refuse to give her that power over me. Instead, I've chosen understanding. Not excusing, never that, but recognizing that broken people break others. Whatever emptiness drove Courtney to such calculated cruelty must be its own punishment to live with. And in an unexpected way, her deception brought gifts. It returned my son to the land that has nurtured our family for generations. It gave me precious years with my granddaughter that distance might have denied me. It taught us both about resilience, about seeing clearly, about the unbreakable bond between parent and child. Last Sunday, as we sat on the porch after dinner, Evelyn sleeping peacefully on her father's chest, Aaron asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Do you think I'll ever trust again, Mom? Ever find someone who loves me for me, not what I can provide?" I considered my answer carefully. The heart is remarkably resilient, son. It knows how to heal, how to hope again. But next time, you'll see more clearly. And I'll be right here, loving you through whatever comes. He smiled then, a full smile that reached his eyes. You know what Dad used to say? William's women have truth in their bones. He wasn't wrong. I laughed softly. Though I wish he were here to meet this little one. He is, Mom, Aaron said, looking out over the fields where twilight was settling. In every acre of this land, in everything you taught me, in Evelyn's Williams' stubbornness. As darkness fell and fireflies began their nightly dance across the lawn, I reflected on the wisdom life has taught me, that motherhood is a lifetime of loving fiercely while learning to let go. That truth, however painful, always serves us better than comfortable lies. That family, real family, isn't about perfect harmony, but about standing together through life's harshest storms. And that sometimes, what seems like an ending is actually a new beginning in disguise. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, know this: you can rebuild, you can find joy again. The heart that breaks open can hold more light than before. I've learned that motherhood means loving your child enough to stand for truth, even when it's easier to stay silent. And that time always reveals what is real. Have you experienced betrayal from someone who pretended to be something they weren't? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your truth might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together we can celebrate the power of authentic love and the strength that comes from facing life's harshest truths. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still days when Aaron struggles with trust, when the weight of co-parenting with someone who betrayed him becomes almost unbearable. There are moments when Evelyn returns from time with her mother full of city stories and sophisticated experiences I can't provide on the farm. But there's beauty in this messy, imperfect reality we've created. Just last month, Aaron started dating again, a local school teacher named Sarah who comes from a farming family herself. She understands the rhythm of rural life, the value of roots, the importance of integrity. Watching them together, I see the careful way Aaron opens his heart, measuring each step, protecting himself while still being brave enough to try again. And Courtney, she's changed too, in her own way. Perhaps it's motherhood softening her edges, or perhaps it's simply the wisdom that comes from losing everything you schemed to acquire. Her visits to exchange Evelyn have become less hostile, more businesslike. She no longer makes disparaging comments about the farm within Evelyn's hearing. Last Christmas, she even allowed Evelyn to stay an extra day so we could celebrate our traditional farm holiday. "She talks about your apple orchard all the time," Courtney admitted grudgingly. "I thought she should experience the whole country Christmas thing. Small steps, tiny bridges being built, not for Courtney and me to cross, but for Evelyn to walk freely between her two worlds without feeling torn apart by them. I've started teaching Evelyn all the things I once taught Aaron: how to collect eggs without frightening the hens, how to recognize when the blackberries are perfectly ripe, how to feel the weather changing in your bones before the clouds ever appear. And on the days when she's not here, I write these lessons in a journal for her, preserving our family's knowledge, our connection to this land, in case there ever comes a time when I can't teach her in person. That's the greatest lesson I've learned through all of this. Love isn't possession, it's preservation. It's nurturing what matters and having faith that truth, given time and space to grow, will always find its way to the light."